Okay. All right, a few things to cover. A few minutes of housekeeping. Webinars of the Natural Areas Association 2017 webinar series begins now. This is part of our continuing commitment to bring the latest and most relevant information to members, as well as to some of the rest of you. Just a note, coming March 15th, we're going to have residual fire regimes and their value in a post-suppression management area with Tom Saladaiga, Assistant Professor of Geography at Concord, and his colleague Alicia Stanley, who is going to bring a sociologist's perspective to that topic. We've got future webinars that we're going to be talking more about at some point on the National Native Seed Strategy, advocacy for natural areas professionals, and maybe even more on pollinators, because it's clearly a very popular topic. For more info on our webinars, I encourage you to go on our website and sign up for our Natural Areas newsletter, and you can get some information that way. And also welcome to our members who already have this information. So if you're interested in pollinators, and who isn't, we recently published a special edition of the Natural Areas Journal entitled Managing for Pollinators on Natural Areas. You have a picture of it there, but in real life it looks like this. And you can order it on our website. If you go to the journal section and click to special issues, it's very easy to click through and order a copy of this. It's been very popular. We've had a great response to it. So with that, let me there we go. I'm going to hand this over to our Executive Director, Lisa Smith. So take it away, Lisa.
Hi, folks. Well, I'm thrilled to be here today, too. Our webinar series are really just proving to be an exceptional way to reach out to our community of natural areas practitioners across the country. As some of you know, those of you who are members of NAA, we do support this community of natural areas professionals in a number of different ways. Through these webinars is one way, but we also have a national annual convening through our Natural Areas Conference. We'll be celebrating our 44th annual conference this year in Fort Collins, Colorado, October. Kate will mention more, she'll remind you about that at the end of the webinar, but that is a great way for us to come together and to talk about these topics that are really critical to the work that we're doing. And we firmly believe that having these opportunities to come together, be it virtually or physically, are important. It's an important thing for us to be doing more now than ever in terms of sharing research, good science around the work that we do, supporting one another in our jobs, and in the good conservation of natural areas. So in addition to the conference, Kate mentioned our special issue of the Natural Areas Journal. As a member of NAA, folks receive quarterly issues of the Natural Areas Journal, and we are proud of this publication. It's been in circulation for several decades, and it still is the go-to resource for the best science around natural areas conservation to date. So we hope you'll give membership to our organization some consideration as you enjoy the webinar today. We've just coming off of a week in Washington, D.C., working with partners to advocate for things that are impactful to the work that you do. Most recent issue that we've been working on is the Botany Bill, which was just co-sponsored by 2 congressmen in Washington, D.C., and you can learn more about this bill on our website. Suffice to say that this is an initiative that several partners have been working on. NAA has been plugged into through the Plant Conservation Alliance. And it is all about giving a voice to plant conservation, plant community conservation, and ecosystem, the importance of ecosystem management. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to communicate with you directly on that. So thanks again. I'll stop there. If you ever have any questions about who we are, what we do, we would be happy to answer them. Back to Kate.
Okay. We're going to go through this quickly. We want to thank our partner, the Bureau of Land Management, for supporting us in this series. Thank you so much. Shout out to them. And one last thing, just referring back to what Lisa said, we have a conference coming up. It's going to be amazing. And our call for papers for that conference will be out within the next 2 weeks. So watch your email. And if you want more information, you can also, and you don't get it through email, come to our website, sign up, check it out. We're excited about it. Fort Collins, Colorado, pretty amazing. A lot of incredible natural areas in that area, and a lot of organizations that are doing some really groundbreaking work in bringing together different organizations in collaboration to preserve and manage land. So we're excited about that. So with that, I am going to hand this off to Scott. So give me a second here. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Kate. I really do appreciate it, and I'm very excited to be here. As everybody else is, I'm really heartened by the amount of people who are interested in pollinators and interested in climate change, and excited that we can continue to move forward, because I think there are some very positive things we can do for pollinators, even under the auspices of that great cloud of climate change that we're all grappling with. So I'm really delighted to be here. I always start my talks with thank yous, because to me, I can't do my job without the help of so many people. So first, I do want to thank my executive assistant, Alex, who helped me set this up. Much better at technology than I am. So thank you, Alex. I also want to thank my family. I've been doing conservation for 3 decades. I guess this tells you how old I'm getting. But I really don't think I could do it without the support and encouragement of my family. I do it for them. I do it because of them. So I wanted to thank them. You don't need to read this slide, but this is a bunch of our funders. And the Xerces Society has more than 10,000 society members, plus foundations, government and public agencies, and corporations that feel that we're doing good work and they want to support that good conservation work, and we could not do that without them. The Xerces Society works basically to translate research into practice, and we could not do that without the dozens and dozens of research partners. We have research partners in every continent, all over the world. This is just a few of our key partners, but we can't do the work of conservation without the science backing, and that is predicated on the great work of these wonderful scientists. And then last, but certainly not least, these are the folks that are in the trenches working for the Xerces Society. They're doing the hard work out there of getting habitat on the ground, helping rare species, doing outreach and education, and I could not do this without their dedication and hard work. So some of you out there may not have heard of the Xerces Society, and it's an interesting and difficult name. We are the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation, and we're actually named after the first butterfly to go extinct due to humans, the Xerces blue butterfly. Robert Michael Pyle, a noted naturalist and butterfly enthusiast, started the society in 1971 because he felt there needed to be an organization that worked with the animals at the base of the food chain. And we've grown since that time, moved from butterflies to all different taxa. So we like to say we'll work on anything without a spine, except we're not going to help conserve politicians. So I know I can't hear laughter. Hopefully a couple of you are laughing about that. So we do our work through a number of different platforms. First and foremost, we work with public agencies and private landowners to understand these animals, to understand their conservation needs, the habitat management needs, because we cannot, again, do this work without that underpinning of science. How do you conserve an animal without knowing what you need to do to conserve it? We also harness citizens to do some of this work for us. Through Bumblebee Watch, the Migratory Dragonfly Partnership, our work on monarchs and aquatic invertebrates, we have thousands and thousands of people across the country providing us important data that we can use to help us identify conservation priorities. These people also become our foot soldiers in our quest to do conservation. So it's a real win-win. I mainly just put this up because I look pretty good in a suit. Just kidding there. But we are an organization that both does science and promotes science and advocates for it. We believe that scientists do need to advocate, so we do encourage both federal, state, and local action for invertebrates and their habitat. One of the main things we do, though, is education and outreach. We've reached over 80,000 professionals since 2008, all over the world, Europe, Asia, and all 50 states, as well as Canada and Mexico. This is how we need to work together. We need to converse and get these issues out, and this is what we do. And then finally, the work of conservation is really done on the ground, and Xerces is all about habitat conservation. We've helped implement more than 400,000 acres of habitat since 2008 and protected and restored tens of thousands of acres for some of the rarest species on the planet. So today I'm going to talk about climate change, and I'm going to first talk about decline in pollinators very briefly. I know a lot of you have probably know a bit about decline of the pollinators, but I thought I'd better put some of this into context so we could talk about how climate overlays both decline and some of the threats. So most of you, or not most of you, sorry, I think that you're way beyond this, but much of the public, when they think of a pollinator, thinks of the European honeybee. And I'm not going to be talking about honeybees today. I'm going to be talking about native pollinators, but I wanted to put a couple things into context. And first, that Xerces has been working on pollinator conservation for decades, yet I think the public really got engaged and politicians got engaged when we started seeing losses of honeybees. Honeybees have always had losses, and managers have, people that manage honeybees, commercial honeybees, have always seen 15 to 20% losses. But in 2006, we started seeing much larger losses, 29 to 40% losses of some of our largest commercial beekeepers. And in 2015, it was over 40%. But I think, honeybees are not going to go extinct. We manage them. It's certainly an issue for our agriculture and some of our agricultural crops. But I think we should be, in a lot of ways, much more concerned with the potential loss of our native pollinators. We have native pollinators across the globe that are doing pollination both of crops and of natural areas. And I'm going to be talking quite a bit about this assessment report of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services on Pollinators, Pollination, and Food Production. Boy, say that 3 times fast. But it's a great report that came out of a UN body a few months ago. It's 800 pages. It's extremely detailed. I'm an author on one of the chapters. But they have found that about 40% of our pollinator species may be at risk of extinction in the coming years. And that's globally. And to bring this home to North America, where we mostly work, we have 3,600 species of native bees in North America, and we don't know what's going on or the conservation status of most of those groups. But we do know the conservation status of a couple of important flower visitors, and that's bumblebees and butterflies. So first with bumblebees, we have 57 bumblebee species in Canada, the US, and Mexico. Generally, there may be some taxonomic issues, and people could quibble with that a little bit. But Xerces Society worked with our science partners across the Americas and the International Union for Conservation of Nature on an analysis of bumblebees in the United States, and have found that about 28% of bumblebees in the United States and Mexico are in a risk category, an extinction risk IUCN category. We also know that butterflies, we have a large body of evidence from Europe and especially England that really has showed that butterflies are seeing large-scale declines in the UK and likely Europe. We also know that many of our rare endemics are certainly in need of conservation attention, and that certain groups like grass skippers seem to be in decline, especially in the Midwest and Northeast. And of course, research has shown that certain widespread species like the monarch are seeing large declines. And I don't think I need to belabor that. All of you know that. The issue is we don't have very many long-term data sets for butterflies, or for any of these other animals. But we do have one important one that I wanted to point out, and this is one from California. This is a data set from Dr. Art Shapiro from UC Davis. Art started doing transects across California in the 1970s, added more transects through the 70s and early 80s, and has continued those transects to this date. So it's an amazing wealth of information that we can look at. Unfortunately, what Art has found is that they are seeing major declines at many of the sites, especially lower elevation sites in the Central Valley. We're seeing marked declines. And what I think is really interesting or concerning from this study is that Art has really found that this crosses all taxonomic barriers. So you don't need to look at this too much in detail, but this is the 5 butterfly families. And what Art is seeing is that we're seeing kind of equal decline in all of these different groups. The red, the hotter the color, the more the decline. And you'll see they're spread out through all of these different groups. And that's concerning. We're seeing declines pretty much across the board for butterflies. So briefly, what are the threats? Well, of course, we build on habitat, or we farm on habitat for these animals. These animals need a place to live, and humans are very good at taking those places and making them unlivable. And I think I do want to point out, as most of you know, that there's actually more habitat likely on the right side of this screen in this urban or suburban area than there are in certain cropped areas. So we're doing some serious changes in habitat, both quantity and quality. Pesticides are also likely a major factor in pollinator declines, everything from mosquito control and agricultural uses. But again, I always like to point out that it's not just folks in ag areas that are seeing these declines. We actually see more pesticide use pounds per acre often in urban and suburban areas than in many agricultural areas. And then a lot of people have been talking about disease, and especially with bumblebees, we have pretty good evidence that commercially produced bumblebees are carrying diseases to their wild relatives. I think disease is really the next big, or maybe, I mean, it's already here, but it's a huge conservation issue as we move animals globally across the landscape. So under all of these challenges, decline and these threats, what do we do in the face of climate change? Well, I think first off, we are gaining information. We understand this issue better than we did a decade ago, but we're still just beginning to understand all of the potential negative impacts of climate change. But I want to go through a few slides to tell you what I think we think we know, what the data suggests, and again, this is based on that UN science platform summary. A lot of this is, they did a very good job of going through all of the literature, so I didn't think I needed to do it again. I encourage you to go and get this report and review it. So, but I think the study suggests that community composition is expected to change as certain species decrease in abundance and others increase. I just finished a chapter on insects in climate change, a little bit broader than pollinators, and really with many animals and climate change, we're going to have climate winners and we're going to have climate losers. Some of our pollinators, especially some of the generalist species, are going to be able to weather climate change, no pun intended, whereas some of our animals are not. We're also seeing seasonal activity of many species change differentially, disrupting life cycles and potentially disrupting pollination service. We're also seeing with insects potentially a disruption with bird food, because many birds feed their young insects in the spring. So we're seeing this disruption in life cycle, and likely we'll see more of that. So the rate of change of climate across the landscape is predicted to exceed the maximum rate that some pollinator groups can disperse or migrate. And so, as I said, we're going to have those winners that are able to disperse and migrate or adapt, and we're going to have those losers that are not. Some studies seem to suggest that bumblebees and butterflies are more prone to local or regional extinction than other bees or potentially hoverflies. So these animals may be at acute risk if they cannot move across the landscape or adapt to climate change. There was a model done by Kuradal in 2015 that really seems to show that that bumblebees are not moving north, actually, and that they may be falling out at the southern end of their ranges and at the lower elevation areas where they live, whereas some other animals seem to be able to move north and are not falling out at their southern limits. So this model, although is simply just a model, I think raises some concern for those of us who work on these taxes. But I do want to point out that this uphill or poleward view of species range shifts is a simplification. A colleague of mine named Michael Bean, I think, coined the term climate destabilization, which I think is a much better term than climate change or global warming, because precipitation is going to change. Some places are going to be wetter, drier. Some places may be warmer for a time. Some places colder, but more disruption. And with that, coupled with land use, is going to really predicate how species are able to move or adapt as climate changes. Now, this is the young compadre fritillary. This is the best job I ever had. In graduate school, I was able to work in Colorado, in southern Colorado in the mountains on this butterfly. But this butterfly only lives above 13,000 feet on the north slopes of mountains under year-round snow. It is an animal that, as climate changes, and likely we aren't going to have that year-round snow, will likely be one of those animals that does wink out early on. But it isn't just high mountain endemics. It's species across the board, species that need wet meadows, for instance, and we're seeing drier conditions in the West, especially in California, but also throughout the Intermountain West, that may affect these species. As well as species like the island marble that rely on coastline habitat. We're already seeing impacts from higher storm surges on some of our coastal butterflies. So with all that negative news, we might just want to go out and drink some tequila and drown our sorrows. But I think there is a way forward here, and I'm ever hopeful. Maybe I do push at windmills a bit, but I do think that that these animals, pollinators and other insects, lend themselves to conservation in an era of human change, global human change. But what we need to be doing is really thinking about the habitat, and we need to be thinking about increasing diversity, having targeted habitat conservation, management, and restoration for the base of the food chain. And this is all for you botanists out there. This is all about plants and the animals that use those plants. But I think we need to be kind of stepping back and focusing on some of the fabric of the landscape that pollinators and the plants that they use provide to all of the other animals out there. And we need to be thinking about high quality habitat with corridors. This is the six-spotted Burnett moth, and studies in the Alps show that where the species has habitat to move uphill, which means where we haven't changed or modified that habitat, this species is able to take advantage and is moving uphill in the face of climate change. We need to be thinking about corridors for these animals and other animals in the landscape. And we also need to be thinking about stressors, such as pesticide use and invasive species. High quality habitat means habitat that is without or has minimal stressors. And I'll talk a little bit more about these stressors in a little bit. So I do think that restoration and diversification of habitat is vital. We do need to be restoring large areas of habitat for pollinators and other insects. But there are often opportunities to better manage habitat. And I think sometimes in this era of climate change, I call it kind of the Johnny wildflower seed approach. There's a lot of folks who are so excited about this who just want to go out and plant. And in a lot of ways, management of areas can be cheaper and can be more efficacious, and in the long run, I believe, easier to manage than new restorations. So I think we need to be doing both. And I'll talk a little bit more about management of some of these areas, but whether it's managing cattle, roadsides, or fire, or invasive species, we need to be thinking about that. It's not all about restoration for these species. Now, I love the name of this organization, the Natural Areas Association, because I think that natural areas are the glue that holds all the other habitat together. And interestingly, coming out of my mouth, people sometimes wonder about me. I think that these areas shouldn't be managed for pollinators. I think pollinators, we should think about pollinators in the management of natural areas, but we should be managing for the natural function, the plant palette, the animal palette that was at these sites, because if we're managing for the natural areas themselves, the pollinators that used those natural areas will be better off. And so I think with natural areas, let's take pollinators into consideration, but let's be looking at natural areas as a natural area and as an ecosystem. Now, other areas I think we can manage with insects in mind and restore or manage habitat specifically for them, and farms are a key place for that. This is a habitat strip that was planted actually for conservation biocontrol, and we can work with farmers and others to restore and manage habitat specifically with these animals in mind. I also want to point out roadsides, because there's 17 million acres of roadsides in the US, and roadsides can provide all of the habitat that pollinators need: foraging habitat, breeding habitat, and I think most importantly for this discussion, connectivity through habitat. I do want to point out, because I'm always asked, and before somebody writes the question, about, well, putting habitat along a highway, aren't we going to see more roadkill of our butterflies and bees? And actually, the data really suggests that that's not the case. The data suggests that if you have a good native plant palette, the diversity of native plants along roadsides, that you see less roadkill. And it makes sense. These animals are not moving farther in the landscape than they need to for the resources that they have, that they need. So they're not crossing the road. And I know there's a joke there somewhere about why the butterfly crossed the road. I haven't worked that one out yet. Wait for that in a future talk. But I do think there's a real place for conservation along roadsides, as well as power line rights of way. I mean, these linear habitats may be especially important to aid dispersal of species that need to move across the landscape. We have power line right-of-ways across the U.S., across North America, and I really think this is an important place that we need to be thinking about along with roadsides and other corridors if we're thinking climate change. And recent research has indicated that these linear habitats, everything from hedgerows to roadsides, can act as corridors for animals in search of food, but also in pursuit of new habitat. And studies in Europe and Canada have shown that some species are actually able to expand their range. This was butterfly species, but expand their range using corridors such as roadsides. So I think from a climate change point of view, this is an important piece of the puzzle. But I also want to point out, and I know when I'm talking to folks, the Natural Areas Association, but conservation of pollinators is pretty neat. We can do it in natural areas, we can do it on farms, we can do it on roadsides, but we can also do it in really small habitats such as homes. And even bee lawns and urban meadows can serve as important habitat for a variety of pollinators. And its dual purpose, as I said, with our citizen science work, these people often become spokespeople for better conservation, and we need those folks as well. So that's the neat thing about pollinators, we can do it anywhere. So I think with this overlay of what we know about climate change and what we know about the threats and the declines, there are some best management practices that we can put in place in different landscapes that are going to truly help. And I think to mitigate the impacts of climate change, as I said, we need these high quality habitats. And to accomplish that, we need both general guidance, and I know that for a lot of agencies and others, we do need this general guidance, but we also need specific guidance, especially for specific regions, specific issues, and especially for rare habitat specialists. I see a lot of best management practices documents out there that don't give me enough information to actually take action in my landscape. And although they're good and they make me think and they lend me some support to what I want to do, I think we need more specificity in some of these documents that I'm seeing. And we also need to work with the land managers or farmers or maintenance staff to better understand the needs and constraints. Best management practices are only as good as their implementation. You write something, if it sits on the shelf and nobody uses it, it's really doing nobody any good. And I think the way that Xerces is trying to focus on this is to try to bring the science and try to then work with the people who are doing the management to best understand their constraints, understand how to overcome those constraints, so that we can actually get something done. There are, again, these big issues that I think we need a better handle on. And I think some broad best management practices could help in these situations. And one of them is disease. As I talked about, we live now in a global society. We move goods across the globe, including we move animals across the globe, and we move diseases with them. So moving bees and butterflies means potentially moving diseases. And Greystock 2013 showed that we do need more effective disease detection and management strategies. We need better management strategies, because we can have all the best habitat in the world. If these animals are hurt by disease, we're not going to have them in the landscape anyway. And a significant concern exists regarding honeybees. Now, honeybees are very important for agriculture, and I think that we need to make sure that we're able to manage honeybees at a level where we can get that pollination service. But there are places in the landscape, potentially, where we have rare endemic bumblebees or wild areas where we should have good best management practices that maybe don't allow honeybees into certain areas, and we preferentially allow them into the more ag matrix and other areas like that. This is a shot of a parking lot where 50,000 to 70,000 bumblebees were killed from an approved application of a pesticide to linden trees. And to me, this really just illustrates that we need better federal regulatory action on pesticide use and pesticide labeling, especially for native bees. And we need to be thinking about how these products are used in the landscape when we're doing restoration. Some of these products are extremely persistent in the landscape and can move via dust off from seed coats, can move through leaching into water, spray drift, all sorts of other ways that these products can move across the landscape. And we do need best practices for when we're doing restoration, especially in the urban or agricultural matrix, to ensure that our habitat is high quality. I mean, some municipalities, as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, are phasing out certain chemicals, so the neonicotinoid class, anyway, on properties that they manage, and I think that this is a part of the puzzle. We also need to do a better job at grazing. Studies show that the abundance of pollinators is in direct proportion to intensity of grazing by cattle. But studies also show that managing stocking rate, duration, and timing of grazing can improve the habitat for pollinators as well, and I think this is important, as well as the range itself, and improve the range for the cattle. And we need to be working with ranchers to ensure that they understand that. Tree encroachment is a huge issue, I think, across the United States. If you look at the left screen, that's from the 1950s. It's an aerial shot of a site I work on with a rare butterfly. And then you look at 2011, you can see that these butterflies and other pollinators and other animals cannot move as easily across the landscape. Now, I'm not saying that we need large-scale logging to fix this, but we do need to be thinking about thoughtful restoration in our forest systems so that animals can move across the landscape as the climate changes. And fire is an important part of that when we're thinking about, encroachment of trees. But we need to be careful how we burn, because burning can extirpate the pollinators on site if it's not done carefully. Now, some animals, some of our pollinators do well under fire. Some of them do really well, some of them do fine. But certain of these animals, like the martin skipper, do not fare well under fire, both controlled and natural fire. And that was brought home by a study I did a few years ago in California, looking at the martin skipper. We were able to take sites and break them in half and do controlled burning on half the sites and not controlled burning on the other half the site. This was a study I did in cooperation with the U.S. Forest Service. And what was really interesting about that study is after 5 years, 4 study seasons, you can see by the yellow bar that in the burned area, the butterflies had not bounced back. So we need to be thinking specifically about what animals are in these ecosystems. And we need to be thinking about the correct combination of timing, intensity, and size to match that with the ecosystems that we are working on. I'm not saying we wouldn't have burned at that site with martin skipper because the habitat is much improved. I'm just saying we need to be careful about how we burn, because had we burned that whole area, we might have extirpated the butterfly from that site. So restoration, as I said, is so important if we're going to move ahead in any effort to ameliorate climate change. And we need to develop native seed sources that are appropriate for the local conditions that we have. Xerces has worked on a number of these projects through our milkweed seed increase project and working with other native seed producers to produce this important seed so that we have it when we need it and have seed that works with local conditions. And it really does need to work with local conditions. We do a lot of work in California, and I know for those in California this year, it does not seem like a drought anymore, but we will likely see drought again, and we need to match our seed and our plant materials to the conditions we have, such as drought, the soil conditions where we're planting, the geography, whether this is in Montana, or whether this is in New Hampshire, or whether this is, you know, a bog, cranberry adjacent to a cranberry bog in Massachusetts, or a pollinator planting in Oklahoma. We need to have the seed and the plant materials for this type of restoration. The neat thing about this restoration too is you can do pollinator restoration that I believe helps in the climate change scenario, but also helps some of our rare species like Carner blue or other species. Also, many different things we can do. This is actually not a planting for pollinators. It's I think pollinators benefit from it, but it's also for conservation biocontrol. So there are lots of reasons we can promote to farmers and others, whether that be songbirds, conservation biocontrol, water quality, to get habitat like this back in the landscape. Now, there are tons of research gaps to understanding climate change and efficient adaptation options. That said, we need adaptive management for sure, but I guess I feel that we have enough information to move forward and adapt as we go. Certainly we need more science on this, and we need to fine tune, and we need to potentially change things as we move along, but I think we can start. So there's a few guidance documents that I just want to end with that Xerces has that practitioners might be able to use. First are our roadside BMPs that we created with ICF International, that we worked with practitioners, we pulled together the science, and we created, we think, documents that are actually usable and applicable. We're starting to do a series of short courses for roadside managers to help them adopt these practices. These are on the Federal Highway website as well as Xerces website. You can find them quite easily. We also have a tremendous amount of material for farmland habitat. It's kind of how we got into pollinators, is working on farmland, and a tremendous amount of guidance for farmland, but also things like urban parks, golf courses, a variety of different landscapes out there, because although the tenets are the same, often specifically what you will do is different, and the message has to be a bit different if you're working with a golf course versus a farmer. So we package these materials so that people will get the most use out of them. We also do a lot of work to put together region-specific and locally specific guidelines on plant materials, planting guides, how you implement a pollinator hedgerow or conservation cover for pollinators. We do a tremendous amount of this work with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, who has been a huge partner for us, a really important partner to help us reach out to the farming community. We also have guidelines, as I said. We need to be thinking about pesticides as we move forward. So we've got guidelines on how to put these habitats in amongst ag or urban areas in that matrix where pesticides might be used. Some specific guidelines for groups of animals like bumblebees, conservation management guidelines, and we're developing a new set of guidelines in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service, best management practices for rangelands throughout the West. And these will include specific guidelines for monarch butterflies as well. So these are in the works. We're doing literature review and going to be talking to practitioners and others to ensure that these best management practices can be used by the Forest Service, by range cons, by the ranchers themselves. So with that, I just want to end by saying, you know, we have a lot of work ahead of us. You as natural area managers are at the front lines of this, and I think we do need to work across these multiple landscapes, and we need to be thinking about high quality habitat and these potential movement corridors. But I think it can be done, and I think that there's a lot of work that we can do over the next 4 or 8 years, because there's a lot of work to do on the ground, whether you work with a city parks or county parks or farmers or the U.S. Forest Service. We can continue this good work of conservation on the ground that we started with pollinators, really going back to the Forgotten Pollinators campaign in the 1980s, which Xerces was involved with. So with that, working together, I think that we can make this happen. Will it be easy? No. But I think there's a lot that we can get done, and I thank you all for the amazing work that you do with your agencies and others trying to make this a better world, not just for our pollinators or songbirds or other animals, but actually for people, because at the end of the day, I think this work is going to mostly benefit humans if we can benefit these other animals. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and I think we're going to be able to take some questions. If you have some questions, go ahead and I guess type them in,
Yeah,
and I'll try to go ahead and answer them as they come up. Aha. First question that I have is, as neonicotinoids are phased out, should we not worry about the next new neonicotinoid systemic pesticide that takes its place? That's a great question, and I certainly agree. And when I had the slide that I talked about the, you know, we need better best management practices for how we regulate pesticides, that was one of the things I was getting at, is we can't simply move from one pesticide to the next. And that's really what we've done over the last decades, is we moved from, you know, older classes of chemicals to newer classes. At one point, DDT was a newer class of chemical, and it was better than the older classes of chemicals, so they adopted it. And they found out how problematic it was, so then we got organophosphates, and then we got pyrethroids, then we got neonicotinoids. And I think we need to move to a system that is more thoughtful and that is more based on integrated pest management. A lot of work to do there, but I couldn't agree more. And as practitioners, what I think we should be thinking is not about neonicotinoids, not even just about systemic insecticides, but about insecticides and other pesticides generally, and how they might impact the habitat that we're either managing or restoring. So thank you for that question. Then another question, I'm looking to combine invasive species control with pollinator habitat restoration along a city trail in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Do you have any suggestions for planting guides with that kind of specificity? Well, one of the things that we do have, good plant lists for the Upper Midwest. How I suggest people use, though, our plant lists is that, we really do know what pollinators are attracted to what plants. And I think our plant lists are really robust and based on data. But I think the best thing to do from there is to work with your local native plant community to identify what is best locally adapted for your area and what's available. One of the things that we always run into with these projects is there may be a perfect plant palette that you can use, but it's predicated on what's available. So we always suggest that we're putting out guidance, and we can't put out guidance for every square mile. So that working with your local native plant nurseries or native plant societies is a great way to go to narrow down these lists for what will be work with the habitat that you are on. Can you say more about what you think the level of threat is and specific harms are from invasive plants? Yes, I think that if you look at least our rare endemic butterflies, which I think we have the best data for from a pollinator or plant visitor point of view, invasive plants are basically number 2 to habitat loss as the threat. And especially with these animals that are adapted to specific habitat requirements and are only left in small habitat patches, invasive plants can be the final straw. So I think that we likely can't manage or eradicate all invasive plants from the landscape, but looking at areas where we're going to have the biggest return for our investment. I also think that I've seen sometimes with native plant removal that we don't sometimes have long-term plans. And it's one thing to come in and we are advocates of using herbicides when needed for invasive plant removal, but we need to be thinking about plans for the long term so that we're not just coming in and doing that once and then they get out of hand again and we have to come in again heavy-handed. So that's hopefully that gets at it, but yes, the threat is real from invasive plants, and especially with the rare endemic butterflies. I'm assuming that would be the case for a lot of our rare endemic bees, but I just don't think we have as much data for that. Is there a source of info studies related to quantifying versus qualitative increases in crop yields based on adjacent pollinator habitat? Useful for engaging the agricultural community. We have some, and we're starting to get more. There's a great partnership that we're involved in called Integrated Crop Pollination. So it's ICP, and if you Google that, there are a whole variety of resources. This is a partnership that Xerces is a founding member of with many universities from across the United States that are looking at just these types of issues. How can we quantify returns? How do we get habitat in? What we do know is that putting in habitat increases the diversity and abundance of pollinating insects, and that those pollinating insects are pollinating some crops, but more work is needed to do, and these are often system specific. So, you know, just because putting in habitat, you know, works for cucurbits, let's say, you know, we need to determine how well it might work for sunflower or for almonds. Although that work is happening, and there's some good resources again at integrated crop pollination. How would you convince large-scale row crop producers, mainly cereals, to allocate some of their lands to provide food and habitat for native bees and pollinators? Man, you guys have some good hard questions here. You know, that's it's a hard issue and a really important issue. Where we've done most of our work and where we get immediate traction is with our farmers who are producing insect pollinated crops, and they really immediately get that, oh, you can put in habitat that will help in potentially the short and long term as a safety net, as an insurance policy if honeybees are not available. Of course, row crops are wind pollinated, and I think we need to use a different tax because pollination isn't going to attract them. I think that we need to work more broadly with universities and others to really start again the dialogue on conservation in agriculture. You know, there are benefits to water quality. There are benefits from conservation biocontrol that we can bring to some of these cereal crops. And I think there are benefits from societal benefits from that. But I don't have a silver bullet. We are working now with some large grain producers to figure out how to put in habitat within these landscapes, because one of the other issues is the high level of pesticide use in some of these systems, and where within these landscapes can we actually implement habitat that is protected from pesticides. So don't have a silver bullet. I think we need to have these conversations and try to move forward and try to work within that matrix as much as possible. And what we're hoping to do is get some farmers who we are working with to potentially be spokespeople for societally why they could set aside some of their habitat for this. But that's a tough question, but thank you for it because it's so important. What are the vulnerable aspects of bee life cycles beyond nectar pollen sources to climate change? Well, you know, bees, most native bees don't live in a hive. Bumblebees are in North America are only true hive nesting group of bees, although some of the other native bees live in aggregations. But most of our native bees are solitary individuals that are provisioning a nest, whether that nest is in the ground or in some woody material. And I think that it's a really important question, because if we're going to provide for bees, we need to be thinking not just of floral resources, but of nesting resources. And there's more work to be done to better understand how to manage for the nesting resources of many of our native bees. We're starting to understand a bit better. We know that certain native bees seem to have a preference for certain nesting materials, but more work needs to be done there. But I encourage folks to think, when they're thinking of native bees or other flower visitors like butterflies, to think about the flowers that they need for nectar or for pollen, to think about what they need. If they're a butterfly, that's a host plant. If they're a bee, it's a nesting place. and to think about what types of poisons or other issues might be in the environment that can affect them. Let me look at the time. I'm not sure how much time we have, so I will try to go to another one here. Will power line habitats have a negative effect on native butterflies and bees? You know, I think that power line habitat can be a really important piece of the puzzle for pollinator conservation. You know, these long linear habitats that have to be managed for basically early succession, because you don't want trees growing up in the power lines, can be managed with pollinators in mind. We're working with a number of folks, or have worked with a number of folks, to do just that. So I think that we can easily work to make these areas an important resource for flower visitors. And as I said in my talk, I think, although the data, I don't have total data to support it, the data we have would suggest that these long linear habitats may provide movement corridors as we need them in the future. One more here. How does managing landscapes for pollinators affect biodiversity or other wildlife? Do you collect data on species diversity of other groups that may be affected by the change in plant species? Well, this was the point I made, that if we're managing for wild areas, we shouldn't be managing, quote unquote, for pollinators. We should be managing for natural function of those wild areas. I would never want to move into a wild area and just say, well, here's the suite of pollinators, here's the plants they need, let's, you know, add all these flowering plants that may or may not have actually been in these systems, or may not have been in them with that abundance or that diversity. So, you know, I do think generally, in farming landscapes, what we see where we're adding habitat into, you know, a farm that might not have seen native plants on it for 50 years, what we see is that when we add these diverse landscapes of native plants that include grasses and forbs and sometimes woody shrubs, that we see an increase in abundance of bees, butterflies, an increase in diversity of both of those groups. But new studies are also showing that other animals are using those landscapes. Birds, for instance, a lot of other insect species, and there's other benefits such as water quality benefits, you know, keeping soil erosion, both from wind or from water. There's so many benefits to those, but we do need to look at this more. We're right now in the process of working with Metro, which is Portland Metro here, to look at how the pollinator community equates to their plant community basis of whether a natural area is high quality or not. So we're starting to look at some of those issues to compare and contrast. So hopefully that somewhat answers your question there. All right, I'm going to keep going until they cut me off, I guess. Can you suggest any research that looks at the threats of competition of honeybees to native pollinators in natural areas? Yes, you can go to our website, and we actually have it's a fairly brief, but it'll get you started, literature review of this issue with some policy recommendations. And, you know, again, we believe that at this point, honeybees are vital in our agricultural systems, and that we do need to be thoughtful of that, but that there are areas where there are rare pollinators, or where we're working towards native conservation of biodiversity in a native landscape where honeybees may not be appropriate because of disease and potentially competition with native bees. But if you go to our website, I think it's fairly easy to find, and that would get you started. Let's see. One last one. Do you have information sources to determine what key pollinators to address in any given restoration area? Well, that's actually a good question, and that would be more site-specific than we would have in any of our guidelines. That said, I think that from a restoration point of view, thinking generally about the different groups of pollinators that might be out on the landscape, whether they are native bees, or ground nesting or wood nesting native bees, or other flower visitors such as butterflies. Bumblebees are certainly an important group that I think are worthy of special focus, and we've created guidelines to specifically address bumblebee conservation. And I would encourage you to look at your local university to see whether anybody has been up at your site to do any surveys, because it may allow you to better understand the fauna that you have. Also, we have Bumblebee Watch, which can really help you to, if you want to get into this, you can start to identify your bumblebees, and we vet the photographs to ensure that the identifications are reliable, and you can start to get a handle of what fauna are at your sites. All right, and I think with that, we are all out of time, but I want to thank you all. I didn't get to all of your questions, but thank you so much for your time. I am always open to having you email me if you have specific questions. It's just sblack@xerces.org. Happy to work with you on projects or answer any questions that we can.
Okay, and I'm gonna just finish it up here. Just thank you so much, Scott, and the whole Xerces Society for that. I think it was really, I think everybody really enjoyed it. The archives are going to be posted soon. Watch your email for more about the 2017 Natural Areas Association webinar series. If you're not on our email list, please sign up. And that's it. Thanks everyone for registering, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks.